Well, I'm back on my bullshit.
Oh no.
So, some might say I never got off of it.
Well, okay, let me guess. You need both of your monitors died, and you're using the voice interface for the Windows now to do this, but you can't decide which monitors to buy.
No, I mean, I did famously once play Mortal Kombat 3 with a broken monitor, but
wait, how did you do that?
Sounds.
You just played with sound?
We had an MK3 machine in the GameSpot office that the monitor died on repeated. Like, we tried to get it fixed, whatever, it wouldn't stick. At some point, Jeff and I just started playing MK3 with no screen.
Who won?
Mostly him.
Okay.
In my defense, I never liked MK3. I was all in on MK2.
You're a purist.
I consider 3 to be a massive downgrade.
Is it because of Striker?
No, it was the dial combo stuff. I just hated the getting stuck in a lengthy combo that you couldn't break out of type. Anyway,
perfectly reasonable. Okay.
He was able to do a fatality or two.
Wow. But how?
Pretty much the only fatalities you could pull off are the ones that were screen length away.
Okay, I was going to say, because how do you know? Because you have to be the right number of pixels away.
Yes, the positioning is pretty specific on those. But so yeah, pretty much all you could do if you did 2 jumps away from where you thought the opponent was, it should put you a full screen length, so you could.
And could you see anything at all, or was it just wow,
just black pit, nothing?
This is amazing.
It was an interesting exercise. Anyway, this particular bullshit is my quest for a PC speaker,
like an old school, a piezoelectric one.
So no, every PC I ever had a cone speaker in it.
Oh, you want a paper one? Yeah,
so it's weird. I went on YouTube and I found a dude who is messing with 86 box, and that thing synthesizes the PC.
Yeah,
it's not FM synth. It's square wave.
It's a square. It's like a square wave piezo. Usually is what it was. What the sound it would make. Yeah,
whatever came out of the speaker header on the motherboard.
Yeah, I had one of those in my wang.
Right. So I interestingly found a video of a dude who thought it sounded too good coming out of 86 box because his family PC in the 90s did have one of the piezo electric ones. So he actually wanted it to sound worse, because this is all about nostalgia. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, you want that bad sound from. I feel like Doom and Wolfenstein would both play sound out of your PC speaker.
Yeah, actually, this led me on a weird rabbit hole of you could find software, digital audio playback drivers from that period that could play sound through the PC speaker purely on the CPU. There's YouTube videos of that stuff out there. There's a lot of wilds. Anyway, I never had one of the piezoelectric ones. Those are very tinny and thin sounding. We always had cone speakers in our cases.
Yeah.
So you can't if you go to Amazon or even Google and type PC case speaker, they're kind of not around anymore.
Nobody makes one that's just a little tiny speaker with a speaker header on it.
The piezoelectric ones are for days. You can pay $5 and get 10 of them on Amazon.
Yeah, that seems right.
But the bigger cone type.
Well, it was like a 1.5 inch cone. Probably it wasn't very big.
So that's the thing, is that I've been searching with language like PC case speaker all this time.
Yeah.
I was watching a video last night where a guy pulled the speaker out of a literal IBM XT, and it's just a little 8 ohm, half watt speaker.
Yeah.
Turns out if you go to Amazon and type in 8 ohm speaker, there are
a bazillion.
Yes, there's more choices you can possibly parse.
Ooh.
So now my question is, can I just buy an 8 ohm speaker and wire the terminals to the header on the motherboard? Is there any reason that won't work?
Probably it's fine. What is I guess theoretically you could blow out the circuit on the motherboard, but you're about to replace that motherboard, so who cares? Let it rip.
Oh, well, that motherboard doesn't work.
Oh.
That I would have to test it on a good motherboard to know. And yes, I saw some people talking maybe current could be an issue. You could blow something out if you don't pair things up right. Do I need an extra resistor in there? I know so little about electricity.
Yeah, no, it's scary. I know how to use computers. I don't know anything about electricity.
But I need to hear that beep. I need beep on boot.
I realized that Windows 11 has a startup sound again.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah. It plays a little chime. It's just dun dun dun.
Is it Brian Eno level quality or?
Yeah, it's okay. It's not Brian Eno level quality. But the Brian Eno one, frankly, is too long. It goes for a long time.
I like how kind of indulgent it is. It's funny though, because there are interviews out there of him talking about how short it was, how hard it was to compose sounds that fit in it can't be more than
it's 3 seconds, 7 seconds or something, isn't it?
Yeah, like he's talked about how like hard and weird that exercise was.
Yeah, this one's just like it's like a slightly long chime. It's not bad. I like a good startup sound. I miss them.
Event sounds. We've talked about it for ages. We should do an event sounds episode.
Did you? Okay, this is completely off topic, and we're breaking the format here a little bit. But did you ever replace Windows sounds with like a sound pack? I did Simpsons sounds.
Oh, actually, yes. No, I totally had the Star Wars quotes for startup and shutdown.
Yeah, I had Star Wars stuff for a while. But the Simpsons one, when I went through and watched the Simpsons with my daughter, it's funny because like I would hear a quote that was that I associate with like error messages in Windows, and it just kind of it made it it's like the computer equivalent of a smell memory where you smell some specific smell and you're like, oh God. And I was like, oh, this was the time that I messed up the modem. This is the modem bad sound. I don't like this at all.
Yep. Nope. You're absolutely right. Every time that I hear Yoda say, help you, I can. Yes. I know that it's time to compute.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad, and I am very self-indulgently going to actually say to anybody listening to this who understands, let me know. Let me know about this 8-ohm speaker thing. I need to crowdsource my bad DIY project idea.
Yeah, it should be fine. Like my guess is that there's not a whole lot you can mess up there. If the old speakers were 8-ohm speakers, I'm sure that it's probably okay.
Yeah, I that's probably like I assume I can just wire a couple of jumper cables to the terminals on the speaker and just plug it into the headers properly and it should be good.
If you take an old, if you have like an old header from a motherboard cable, you can also buy those. They're like 4-pin Molex connectors. They're mini Molex. I can't remember what the name of the connector is, but it's a standard connector type, and you can buy a bag of those for probably like 50 of them for like $1.
Oh, I have. Trust me.
Yeah. So then you need to buy the pins, the cables, and they just snap in. So you solder the cable onto the speaker thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It should be easy. You get two. I'm curious now.
Okay. All right. How are you?
I'm alive.
Doing? You're here. You sound more normal.
Yeah, I'm a little deeper than normal, I think, still. The long-term repercussions seem minor so far.
That's good.
But I took the kiddo. We took advantage of our brief immunity window and went to see a movie yesterday in a theater, which was exciting. Masks on.
Okay. Should I ask what movie?
We went to see the Minions: The Rise of Gru. It was her request.
Did you
it's
dress
a classic.
up?
I did not. What do they call it? Minion formaling or whatever. I didn't wear a suit to the Minions.
Yeah. Apparently it's been banned a lot of places.
Oh, wow.
So it's probably.
It was 118 degrees out here yesterday. And there were 4 other people in a 200 seat theater with us. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty. So how long is the immunity window now? Is it
like 2 to 4 weeks is what we're assuming.
Wow.
Yeah. We're a little tighter than normal, I think, though.
Huh.
The big thing though was like we got to our seats and I realized we'd forgotten straws, so I had to go back and get straws. And by the time I climbed back up, she was like, "Hey, Dad, do you have any napkins?" I was like, "Oh crap!" So I walked back down the stairs, and by the time I got back up the stairs, I was like, "I need a nap. I am so freaking tired."
Wow!
And it was like 12 stairs, so my endurance is not what it once was. Is what I will say.
Did you fall asleep?
I did not fall asleep during the movie. But we did manage to spend, we managed to not get Gina sick. So she masked up in the house the whole time.
That's kind of amazing.
Washed her hands and like was super careful. But yeah, she did a PCR the other day and she's clean. And I think I tested negative after 9 days and the kiddo did after 8 or 7. But it wasn't great. I would advise people to not get it, the Rona. It sucks.
Not a recreational activity.
No, to like get vaccinated and stuff too. Cause like when the doctor was like, hey, this is minor. I called the doctor. The doctor was like, hey, do you want Paxlovid? And I was like, tell me about Paxlovid. And she was like, look, here's the side effects. And she ran down the list of side effects. And she's like, okay, so there's some minor stuff. Like you'll have a bitter taste in your mouth the entire time you take it.
Huh.
I was like, that doesn't sound that minor. And she's like, oh, no, compared to the other stuff, it's minor. And she's like, kidney failure is a potential thing. I was like, oh, no, I'm probably good. If this is, I'll be okay. So,
they have to tell you that.
Yeah. That's just what the man wants you to think. So, but yeah, I feel, generally speaking, much better, a little congested, a little coffeeier than normal. And I'm still kind of taking it easy. So,
yeah. I'm glad to hear you're on the mend, and yes, don't push yourself too hard. There's like a bunch of messaging coming out lately from the medical community, basically saying like, "Hey, please continue to take this seriously." Not from the standpoint of like trying to avoid getting infected, but more like once you get it, like don't just like work through it.
Well,
don't act like it's just a cold. Like the harder you push yourself while you're in the active infection, the longer it's going to take you to get better, because this really takes it out of you.
Well, and my understanding is also there's a fair amount of data that indicates that seems to indicate that the longer it takes you to recover and the more you push hard during the recovery, the more likely you are to suffer from long COVID symptoms. Right. So like the doctor was like, okay, so here's the deal. You have to exercise. You have to do enough activity that like you get your lungs going, but not so much that you are straining yourself. So I was like, what does that mean? She's like, well, normally I tell you to go take a walk around the block, but since you're someplace it's 120 degrees outside, that's a bad idea. I was like, what if I go out and like move my arms and legs in the pool for 15 minutes? She's like, that's perfect.
Ooh, sounds pretty good.
Yeah. So I did a lot of floating in the pool. Like it turns out if you're going to have a fever and chills and stuff, being someplace where it's 115 degrees outside during the day and you can just go outside and immediately be warm, pretty good.
That sounds all right.
Yeah.
Get sick in the desert if you can.
Yeah. Hey, happy birthday, by the way, Brad.
Thank you.
I missed you earlier this week. I'm sorry.
Thank you for that. Yeah, while you were convalescing, I had a birthday, which I guess per our now annual tradition means we're going to do a year in review.
Yeah, congratulations on another revolution.
Oh boy, no, it's just I'm deep into now I'm sitting here pondering, like I'm still in my early 40s, right? Like 43 is like late
That's still early 40s, yeah.
That's like late early 40s, not early mid 40s, right?
Borderline early mid, yeah.
That's what I'm going to keep calling it.
Look, I'm late mid now, so
oh no,
I've got 1 year until I'm in late.
Oh no.
How much longer is the ponytail this year than last year is the real question.
It's pretty long.
Really?
Well, I never.
You got like 4 inches on it this year. Wow, that is a tight.
I have developed a fairly tight bun.
It's a tight knot. Yeah, like you could put a hat on that thing, you wouldn't even know it's there.
It's true. It's true. If I let it down, it is like mid chest now.
Wow.
Like I'm kind of tempted to just keep going and see what happens.
I mean, look, it's not like you leave the house ever. It's probably fine.
Very true. Very true. Anyway, I just copied you.
Yes.
From a couple months ago when we did. After your last birthday, you chose the year you graduated from high school.
1993, a fine year.
Yes. So I went and did the same, which is 1997.
Well, we talked about it because like 97 is an interesting year. 98 is an interesting year. 99 is an interesting year. They're all kind of like a lot of, it was active.
96. Hey, it turns out every year a lot of, you know what?
Things happen.
Stuff is happening.
Yeah.
All the time, it turns out. But yes, we settled in 97.
Yeah. 97 is the year before I graduated from college. I don't remember a lot of 97 because I was working, I was putting networks in businesses at night and, and then going to school kind of during the day, but mostly just playing a lot of Quake World.
Installing networks overnight is not the kind of senior-itis partying that I was expecting to hear, but
I didn't pay, like I finished college with no debt because I was able to charge people $40 an hour to run 10 base 2 for them because I bought a crimper. Yeah.
$40 an hour in 1997 is pretty good.
Everybody wanted networks and they had no idea why, but I was like, I can put a network in for you. I'm good. I will make this happen.
I was charging $10 an hour for the like computer tutoring and stuff that I was doing around that time. What was I doing?
Well, I mean, look, it was a weird thing that I kind of fell into because I was talking to somebody and they were like, hey, do you know how to do this? I was like, yeah. And they were like, my boss wants to put a network in. And I was like, I can absolutely, it was a friend of mine from school. My boss wants to put a network in. I was like, well, I can come talk to him and show him how to do it. And then like, I helped him do it. at a much lower price. And then he was like, look, you should be charging more for this. And also I can introduce you to a bunch of people who want the same thing done. So I ran a bunch of networks for people and paid for school.
That's pretty awesome.
It was good. That sounds fun. I was very lucky. It was the right time at the right place, because like 2 years later and it wouldn't have been possible.
Okay. Shall we get into it?
Yes, let's do.
These are kind of scattershot. These are sort of all over the place.
It was an all over the place kind of. It was the Clinton years, man. Things were weird.
Sure. Yeah. Tell me about it. Speaking of,
yes,
that was the year that Dolly the sheep was cloned in Scotland. Remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember that was huge, right? Like, am I misremembering? Like, I feel like that was a kind of massive media event.
Well, it was a massive media event, but also I was a junior in a biochemistry and molecular biology program, and the professors had really mixed vibes about it. Like, some of them were like, this is really cool. And then some of them were of the opinion that this was just some really nice pipette work and nothing really to be celebrated. Because all they did was I think it was that they micropipetted a nucleus from a mammary cell into an embryo, into a fertilized embryo. So they pulled one nucleus out and then spat a new one in, and they were like, okay, let's see if any of these work. And then one of them worked. And
I assume of course they would have genetically verified that.
Well, yeah,
the sheep was identical.
Look, I mean, to you and me, sheep all look the same, but to an expert, they could tell.
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't realize, reading about this in research, that this was not the first mammal ever cloned, period.
The rest of them they did from
embryonic cells. Yeah. So they had cloned embryos essentially previously, but the big deal here was that they had cloned an adult animal.
Yeah.
And I didn't put it in here. I also noticed this was the same year that Clinton signed a ban on federal funding for research on human cloning.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was a response to this.
Well, it was federal funding on human cloning and also stem cell research.
Oh, was that all in the same bill?
I don't know if it was the same bill, but like it was. Look, back then, things have moved a little bit. It was a weird time for politics and the fundamentalist right and
compared to now,
it was the beginning totally of the problems that we have now.
Yes. Oh, you were yes. Yeah.
Newt Gingrich was elected Speaker of the House in 1997. Also,
okay, yeah, enough said.
It was bad news. The animals that got cloned had almost universally bad outcomes.
You're not wrong. Although reading about this, it was not as bad as I thought. Like in my memory, like this was like, oh, they technically pulled it off, and the sheep did live, but it was not really like a viable animal. But like reading about it, like she did okay, not amazing. I mean, she had 6 lambs.
Yeah,
over the course of her shortened life. But so I guess let's see, she's a Finn Dorset is the breed of sheep. Which normally lives 11 to 12 years.
Yep.
She, at the age of 4, developed arthritis and started having walking problems. And then she was actually euthanized at 6.5 due to a progressive lung disease and worse arthritis. So yeah, you're right. You're right. She was not doing great.
Not a great outcome.
No.
I mean, it's weird though. Like, I wonder if it's because like now my understanding is you can, if you have a lot of money, you can pay someone to clone like a dead pet.
Yes,
if you want. True. And I wonder if the same, like, I have to imagine you're going to have similar outcomes. I don't know. It's the whole thing is really weird.
I really should not go to Google and type pet cloning, but I've already done so.
Oh no. I think you mean back rub also.
Oh, yes, we'll get to that. Oh, let's see. Wow. Okay. Here's a company called Viagen.
Yeah, that's a good
total cost
company name.
That's right. The total cost of dog cloning is $50,000.
It seems like it'd be a lot easier to just go to the animal rescue and get another puppy.
Yeah, you might think so.
Like, I love my dog, but I wouldn't want another. I'd just get another dog at this point. I think
that's probably the thing to do. I'm not even down with purebreds. So like I'm always like, go find a shelter mutt. There's a lot of shelter mutts that need homes.
What? Yeah, I mean, this is, so one of the things that happened with the cloning stuff is that we ended up having a lot of, it made it possible to there's good science that came out of this. We joke about Dolly, but, it's been beneficial.
Yeah.
In some way. I'm sure.
Okay. I see some stuff here about further stem cell research that came from it and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Continuing cell lines, stuff like that.
Yes. Anyway, also a big media event.
Yeah.
Here's a name I have written down here.
I do really like, I want to shout out to my genetics professor who literally in that thing was like, somebody asked a question at the end of the lecture one day when the news broke. And he was like, okay, look, this is the most bullshit you've ever heard. Right. And he's like, here's why. They took a nucleus. Somebody who did this is really good at pipetting without breaking cell membranes. And he's like, anybody in this room could do that if you spent a few weeks practicing. And look, here they are on Newsweek because people cared about Newsweek back then.
I could have cloned that sheep in my sleep.
Yeah.
There's seems like a fair amount of low key shade in the academic world.
He was kind of an asshole for what it's worth.
Well, yeah, but also like there's just a lot of contentious disagreements about study results and so forth.
Yes, that's also true.
Okay, here's a name I've written down.
Okay.
WinNuke.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember WinNuke?
Nuke.exe. I remember at the end of Hackers, they run that, and it's the thing that brings you hack the planet, bro.
Wait a minute. I wonder if this was the nuke type of exploit named after that scene.
I think it's the other way around. Oh no, Hackers was 95, right?
No, that's the thing. So WinNuke was released in 97. WinNuke is the first.
It might have been.
Yeah, and Hackers was a couple years before that. I think that's entirely possible. WinNuke is the first like wide scale internet vulnerability exploit type thing that I remember making the news and being a big deal.
Well, because it ran across TCP, right? Instead of like local network stuff. Like most at that point, like the stuff that was a problem was like word macro viruses and worms and stuff, like worms that ran over local networks rather than the broadly addressable internet.
Right. I know you had internet access a good bit before me on account of going to college earlier and stuff, but like this is like a matter of months after I even got on the internet, period, like ever touched the internet for the first time.
Oh, wow. I had ISDN in 97 by that point. Yeah. It wasn't, look, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, it was twice as fast as a modem. Still not great.
Hey man, when I was happy to get 3 kilobytes a second. Okay.
Like it was symmetrical though. So that's nice.
Downloading a megabyte in 2.5 minutes instead of 5 would have changed my life.
Yeah, it was.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to get into the nitty gritty. Yes, they exploited a specific component of the TCP header called an urgent pointer. Apparently that flag is used, I'm quoting from Wikipedia, used to indicate that some of the data in the TCP stream should be processed quickly by the recipient. The affected operating systems did not handle that field correctly. So that was, and this caused a blue screen. To be clear, this was Windows 95, NT, and the 3.1s would all blue screen from this.
Yep. That would do it. We had a computer lab that was all Linux machines at this point in the CS department, and the admin of that group, after the lab closed, we would all go play 3-Wave CTF in there, and
like the Linux version of Quake.
No, we probably booted to Windows for that. Would be my guess.
Okay.
But also, people knew the IP addresses of those machines, and you'd occasionally get a mysterious blue screen if you're doing too well in the game. Weird. What a weird coincidence.
Very strange.
Yeah. Shocking.
God, what Linux was even out in 97? Slackware, and that was about it.
Red Hat, probably Debian.
I guess Red Hat was that early, right?
Yeah, Red Hat and Slackware were the two kind of early ones. Gentoo was probably out shortly thereafter, if not by then.
You're right, the Debian was, and I would not be surprised if I assume Gentoo has been around since the Stone Age. We found it in a cave.
Gentoo was like the one that the hardcore people did, but I feel like the lab ran Slackware because that's what the guy who was the admin was a Slackware guy.
Okay. That makes sense. Slackware was the one I had heard of in the 90s for what that's worth. And also, like, as much as Arch, I think, has the reputation for being like the graybeard distro these days, like I get the sense that Gentoo is like an order of magnitude more nuts than that.
Gentoo, I installed Gentoo a couple of times, and the problem with Gentoo was you had to compile everything.
That's exactly it. Like it's the one that makes you compile everything.
Yeah, which like back then you'd get like probably a pretty decent speed increase on the hardware that you were running. Now it's just a thing that a crazy person would do because the power, like you don't. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the stereotype I've read about is like people just endlessly trying to optimize the compile flags for their kernel when they built Gentoo to get like 0.001% more speed.
Yeah, but like if you're running a lab with 30 computers in it, then students are running it like Slackware or Red Hat or something like that is the way to go. This is when Red Hat was still not a like enterprise product at that point. It was just a Linux distro would be my guess.
Interesting.
Because they didn't go public until like 99 or 2000, I think.
So the username of the person who published the C code for this exploit was _ECI.
What is ECI? It's short for?
How much do you want to bet that was just their initials? Do you think that's...
Oh. Eric, Chris.
Don't know.
Wow. Maybe. Did they find out who wrote it?
Not that I've seen.
Huh.
Microsoft eventually issued patches some weeks or months later, but because the source code was out there, like a zillion little tools were made by all kinds of people with names such as Fed Up, Kill Me, Liquid Nuke, Muerte, Nuke Attack. So let's see.
Well, I mean, it's important to remember at this point, Microsoft was the enemy of freedom on the internet. Right?
Oh yeah, of course. This was firmly in the micro $ oft era.
It may have even been a little bit before that. This was just when like they were just the evil empire, the destroying everything. They'd killed OS2 Warp. They were coming after your computers.
God, Jean-Baptiste on the VLC false pod that we put up recently talking about there still being a version of VLC maintained for OS2 has made me really want to go install OS2.
Install OS2. That's your out for your computer problems.
It's the second time I've mentioned 86box on this episode. I've been eyeballing that thing for a while and kind of putting it off until I build a new desktop because it does need a fair amount of CPU grunt.
But is it just a software emulator for like a 586 CPU?
I don't know how much actual virtualization it's doing. I haven't really looked at what's going on under the hood. If it's like actual VMs or what the deal is. It's like I conceptually you can think of it as a much more capable glorified DOS box.
Oh, okay.
But instead of like DOS box, I think is just sort of an interpreter for like DOS system calls or whatever. This thing emulates everything from the BIOS up, and it's like I believe it might be actual classic BIOSes, or maybe those are copyrighted and it uses like a substitute. But like, you can define everything about the system. You can tell it like what kind of hard drive geometry you want.
Wow.
Like you can say, hey, I want the platters of this hard drive to be like they were in a Quantum Fireball from 1998.
Jesus.
Like it's a super hardcore way to run old x86 PC stuff. Anyway.
That sounds fun. A lot of the stuff from that time period is really hard to run on modern machines.
It sounds kind of amazing. And that would be the natural place to do something like play with OS2 Warp. Or OS2 3 pre-Warp.
Ooh, OS2 Warp was way before this though. Should we talk about Wi-Fi?
Yeah. 802.11. Just 802.11.
Yeah, this was just the spec for the like underlying layer, right? Yeah. And it was like nothing shipped. Like this was, hey, here's a way to do wireless networking as defined by the IEEE. And then nothing happened until I think 1999 or early 2000 is when I first saw 802.11 hardware in the wild.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked about this before. I've talked about that like weird hole in my memory, that gray period where I think Wi-Fi was around, but I wasn't super aware of it. And then the next thing you knew, everything was wireless. Like I didn't get my first wireless router until 2008.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I mean, I was probably late on that.
Well, so yeah, it was the thing that kicked it off was when Intel started advertising laptop chipsets on TV with wireless,
right?
And like the Centrino stuff with 802.11b just being a feature of like going from, hey, here's a thing you have to pay an extra $100 for that nobody wants, to a thing that you already have and you just need to buy a router to make work, suddenly became a good thing. Also, the other thing that pushed it over the edge is everybody suddenly started needing a router because there were a bunch of worms that spread over the internet that if you had a Win 95 or Win 2000 machine just on the raw internet, you'd have real problems.
Yes, we have talked about your past indiscretions.
Look, I got a nasty letter from the ISP. I was like, there's nothing wrong with my computer. And I looked at my computer. I was like, oh God, there's a lot wrong with my computer.
This unpatched Windows 2000 machine that is directly connected to the internet.
It was patched. It just wasn't firewalled. Mistakes were made.
That was a naughty computer.
We all get an SDSL machine and think we have a SDSL connection. We're like, I have a T1 coming into my bedroom. I should have a server. And it turns out I should not have had a server.
I've always wondered what the separation is between the letter designations on 802.11. Like there is technically an A, although I think that's like some very early spec that's described as OFDM waveform here.
Well, A, there were two. No, A wasn't A the 5.4 gigahertz variant.
Yes, A does operate in the 5 gigahertz band.
Yeah, it was the early Sonos stuff was based on A.
Interesting. Okay, so A is not super consumer facing from the sound of it. I mean, B obviously it was BGN. Everybody knows then AC.
Well, no, A was available, but the spectrum wasn't as unified around the world.
Okay,
you could buy 802.11A stuff. It didn't penetrate as well because it was higher frequency.
Yeah.
But you had much better bandwidth on the A hardware than you did on the B hardware.
Interesting. Okay.
It turns out most people, like if you go back and use 802.11B now, the range is abysmal. And there wasn't an easy way to do like access point hopping or anything like that even. So unless you had a high end commercial setup, which really didn't exist because you'd go to, it's hard to remember, but there were like big technology events. Like there were Apple events and CES keynotes and stuff like that, where the Wi-Fi immediately died the moment the event started because all the reporters would connect on their laptops to Wi-Fi and it would just completely crash the network.
Oh, I remember.
And that didn't get fixed until N really when we started having more spectrum available and smarter access, heavier access points.
Right.
The A was unusual but available in the US regularly. We reviewed A cards.
Interesting.
And AB cards were not super uncommon. Often you would buy an AB, like often laptops would have AB, but they wouldn't wire antennas onto the A ports, so you wouldn't have anything. Like they just turn them off in the BIOS.
Also, yeah, on the point of the naming, like there are no intermediate standards. It's not like there's B, C, D, E. Like it literally just goes from B to G and then from G to N. So I don't know what drives that naming.
There's C, D, and E probably were things that either faltered and didn't get ratified, or are other aspects of the protocol, like security access or handshaking or something like that. Negotiation.
Man, standards.
I mean, at some point we should do a hey, how does the IEEE work episode? But I feel like that'll just be a bunch of companies get together and talk to each other, and then everybody yells about the things that they want, and then it all gets jammed in, and then a handshake happens, and a IEEE standard was born.
Yes, or in the USB case, they make the worst possible version of every decision.
Look, it's USB 3.2 generation C now.
Dude, I cannot. I don't get me started. Now that I'm in the position of buying a new motherboard and looking at what the I/O is on there, as one does.
Yeah, and
realizing how god awful USB naming has gotten. Like, what happened?
You mean super speed USB 20 gigabits? Oh, sorry. USB 3.2 Gen 2x2 or USB 3.2? Which one are you looking for, Brad?
I mean, I guess the upside is the board I'm looking at does have one of those 20 gigabit ports on it, which is cool. I didn't know that even existed, but what?
USB 4 Gen 2x2 or just USB 4?
How did we get to a 3.2 Gen 1 and 2? What are you people doing?
Well, they simplified the naming scheme.
Oh, of course they did.
Yeah. That was what. So instead of having USB 3 and 3.1 and 3.2, now we have USB 3.1, 3.2, and USB 3.1 Gen 2, and then USB 3.2, and then USB Gen 3.2 Gen 2x2, which is a double wide 3.2 Gen 2 connection. It all makes perfect sense, Brad.
Hey, did you know that September 97 was when Steve Jobs rejoined Apple?
The prodigal son returns.
Yes. Well known. I don't know how much we need to get into it. Apple acquired. Actually, the thing I have been reading about a lot for whatever reason is the absolute boondoggle of Apple operating systems in the 90s.
Oh, yeah. It was real bad.
I mean, granted, like everything at Apple in the 90s was a boondoggle. I mean, they were like, what was it? 90 days from bankruptcy or something? What's the famous stat when
Yeah,
Microsoft
it was like they
Microsoft
didn't have any
invested
money.
a ton of money.
Yeah, and Microsoft put $150 million in, but more importantly, committed to releasing Office on Mac so that
Yes.
people continued buying Macs. That was
Yes.
that was the thing that, like, they were, like, IT purchasers were worried that Office was going to go away, and then they'd buy a bunch of these expensive Macs, and then there'd be no software to run on them, and they'd be hosed.
And this was back when like format wars were a much bigger deal, right? Like if you needed to be in the Office ecosystem, you needed to be in the Office ecosystem, right? Like it's not like, like every word processor now pretty much can open every format.
Well, it's still kind of the case, though, because like if you do contract work and your lawyers send you Word document files that are annotated and have all the like the subheads and all that stuff, and you open them in something else, it's going to jack up the subheads even today.
That's fair. So that investment, was that literally the same announcement? Like, was that all one?
It was a couple weeks later, as I recall, or maybe before. Okay. It was an important, like it was Bill Gates's way of saving Apple, of doing what he could to save Apple.
But also, well, I started to say in the shittiest way possible, but I think my memory is entirely colored by the way this is portrayed in Pirates of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Which is like Noah Wyle as Steve Jobs, like giving some presentation, and like it's like a real Darth, like the Empire Strikes Back, the doors opening and Darth Vader is there moment of just like the giant looming face of Bill Gates appears on a screen.
Well, that's how it happened at Macworld,
and everybody loses their minds in a bad way.
Yeah, that. I think it was Macworld is where that happened, right?
Is that fairly historically accurate? We really need to watch that movie at some point.
My understanding is that Bill Gates's face had appeared giant on the screen at Macworld behind Steve Jobs and was like, "Hey, Office, we're going to keep making Office, and here's $150 million strategic investment in Apple."
And like, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I remember like the Macintosh community just treated this like the end of the world, right?
It's difficult to say because there's like, as always, well, okay, so there was a game you used to play when you went to Macworld, which is this person on the phone with somebody, like with a headset in, or are they talking to themselves? Because the community was pretty evenly divided between like old school homebrew computer aficionados and like the kind of people who were into computers in the 80s before they were really a business thing for most people. And then like, by that point, there was a burgeoning new class of people who were like putting Macs in IT environments and stuff like that. And the reactions were wildly different in all the different places. The working community was pretty strongly pro, because that meant that like they could actually safely invest in these computers that they clearly liked if they were going to Macworld. The people who were the true believers thought it was bad news, as I recall.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the faithful, you might say, are who I was talking about there. But
yeah, but like those faithful, like they all like when they didn't like when the candy colored iMacs came out, they didn't like any of they were upset by the entire thing. They were carrying Newtons around still, probably.
Sure. Yeah. Anyway, like, Steve Jobs' second tenure at Apple is very well documented. We don't need to get into that, but like I'm endlessly fascinated by, like, I think we've talked about it recently, like the Copland project at Apple was their first attempt to replace the Macintosh system software since the beginning of the Mac. They got up to System 7 and it was all the same operating system. And then Copland was the like absolutely like disastrous attempt
never even released, did it?
No, it never came out. It never came out. Like if you go back and read about like the demo events they were having people out to for that thing, like it literally couldn't just sit at a desktop without crashing. Like
and System 8 and System 9, while they were functional and shipped on a whole bunch of machines, were not good OSs. And
System 8, they literally took what was going to be the last major feature release for System 7 and like gussied it up with slightly new UI and stuff and renamed it to System 8. Like that's how dire things were.
Well, yeah. And it's important to note at this time, Microsoft was really taking over, and like Windows 95, 98 were both good releases. And at the same time, NT4, but at the same time, NT4 was really, really exciting because it was like doing symmetrical multiprocessing. It was like there was all sorts of stuff that was happening in NT. We'll get to this in a minute. Well, actually, we can talk about it now if we want. But like Microsoft released DirectX 5, including betas for DirectX 5, which gave low level like metal access to hardware on NT4. Like you could get a beta for DirectX 5 on NT4.
Is 5 the first one that ran on
there were bits of DirectX 3 that ran before, but like the 3D acceleration stuff never worked before.
Oh God, you're taking me back now. Yes, I remember. I think this is definitely around the time that I had my dalliance with NT4. Where I was like, oh, I'm going to run the powerful next generation future Windows. But yes, I remember like trying to install I think there was no Direct 3D.
There was no Direct 3D 3 for NT4.
When you were running DirectX 3 on NT, it was I think you got sound and maybe
networking and input, as I recall.
But no 3D acceleration. So no, you couldn't play Direct 3D games on NT, but you could play OpenGL.
Right. So you could play OpenGL and Glide.
Which at the time was kind of all that mattered. I mean, there were
you were playing Quake mostly.
Right. Not a lot of Direct 3D. I mean, that was starting to happen. But anyway, just real quick, just to close the loop on the Apple stuff, Jobs came back because Apple bought Next, because the reason they bought Next was to get Next Step, the operating system.
Yeah.
But they basically hit a wall where they were like, we don't have it in ourselves to architect our next generation operating system. We need to just go buy one because we're going to go out of business.
Well, making OSs was hard. Yep. And they shopped, by all reports, they shopped around Next and B also, BOS, Jean-Louis Gasset's other Mac spin-off operating system.
That's the Gil Amelio was running Apple at the time. I think they looked at some others as well, but you're right. Like B and Next were the two major candidates to become the next Mac OS.
But both former high-profile Apple employees who had gone off to do other things, and
dude, how incredibly different would the history of computing be if they had bought B instead of Next?
Who knows what would have ended up happening, because Next wasn't in super good financial shape.
Oh,
like the market for that kind of computer was evaporating under the growth of the PC market at that point. So
commodity hard. Yeah. Next for people who don't know, those were academic and research workstations. They were what, 50, 60,000. No, that's not right.
No, that's SGI.
I'm thinking about SGI.
Very expensive though.
I think they were in the $6,000 to $10,000 range for Next boxes or something like that.
They were wildly overpriced, and they were being outperformed by the Intel and AMD hardware by really, really quickly.
Right. But they had a really robust, well-designed Unix based operating system, which became Mac OS 10 anyway.
Turned out to be important.
This is right up there with Dolly in my memory of big media sensations. This was the year that Garry Kasparov competed against IBM's Deep Blue supercomputer in chess.
It was the second time, right?
Was it?
I thought they had another game before that, but this was the computer beat him.
Yes, this was the 6-game series where he lost. But it went to a tiebreaker, or a final game, I should say.
Yeah, it was their second 6-game showdown.
Okay.
But the computer won in the final game in an hour or something.
Yes,
it was. I want somebody to make a movie about this, but I don't know how you make the computer the antagonist.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I had glossed over that. This is the year that it beat him.
Yeah, previously I think he fought to a draw. Maybe I can't remember.
I think he won. Yes, no, he beat it 4-2 the first time in '96. The thing I was interested in here was that actually I stopped and was like, wait a minute, what was this thing made out of? What did it run? And I went and looked. So they described it as a supercomputer at the time.
Yeah.
But it was mostly massively parallelized. It had 30 PowerPC CPUs in it.
Well, that makes sense given IBM. Yeah.
But it also had 480 custom microprocessors, which this article describes as chess chips. They were quite literally. So those, I've got a quote here from the museum where Deep Blue is shown off. Let's see. The chips contained 1.5 million transistors and ran at 24 megahertz.
Well, I mean, if you think about the time, Pentium 2 was running at 233 megahertz, so that's not.
Yeah. It's not, but still. Well, but so this museum display actually comments on that. Let's see. The chip contained only 1/4 of the number of transistors of a Pentium 2, but it was quite literally designed just to accelerate the algorithms, the kind of
need for chess.
Search algorithms they were using to play chess with. So this is literally the world's first hardware chess accelerator.
Wow.
Which, maybe 3FX should have gotten into the chess acceleration markets.
I don't know. Maybe.
They were too busy making graphics cards and physics cards when they could have been making chess cards.
Yeah, it's funny that stuff didn't land for me, but also I don't know that I had a TV connected to TV. Like at that point, I had probably just a TV with a Genesis and a SNES hooked up to it.
Sure. I don't remember
a VCR maybe.
Yeah, I didn't pay a ton of attention to it either at the time. But another interesting fact here is that Kasparov wanted to study other games that the computer had played prior, and IBM said no.
Oh, wow. Really?
So he actually just went and got a bunch of off-the-shelf commercial PC chess games and started playing those to try to
Battle Chess and Chessmaster 3000.
I'm really curious which ones he was playing, but yeah, he just went and played like straight up chess games to try to understand how chess algorithms worked, because they wouldn't let him see Deep Blue's history.
That's really interesting, because normally in the chess world, all past games are public knowledge. Like you can go back and watch everybody, like that's all recorded. You can go back and watch Gary Kasparov's games against everybody he ever played in a tournament.
That seems like maybe questionable. I don't know.
Yeah, got to give the computer some sort of edge.
Fair. Let's see. Not a ton going on in space and astrophysics in 97.
There was a Mars window there, right?
Yes, the Mars Pathfinder mission.
Yeah, that's the one with the little tiny itsy bitsy rover, which was the first rover, I believe, first wheeled rover,
the Sojourner
to tread another planet, and it was kind of an early internet phenomena, as I recall. Yeah, like the Quake news sites would post new pictures from the rover. The rover was a little solar powered 6-wheeled baby rover. So the Pathfinder was the one that landed in the bag, I believe, right? It was a bouncing beach ball, and it had to land flat side down.
Yes, right.
Yes. Or else
so Pathfinder was the overall mission and lander, I believe.
Yeah,
and Sojourner was just the rover.
Yeah, and so it opened up the side panels, and then the rover rolled off after a few days. And we got a lot of pictures. I remember seeing pictures constantly from that. It was cool.
I'm surprised I don't remember that being more of a sensation, because you're right. It was the first rover to ever drive on another body in the solar system.
Well, I also believe that was the first time I ever went to a NASA, or one of the first times I ever went to a NASA website. Like the NASA website, like they posted the pictures from the rover, and you could see them before they were on the news. If you just went to the FTP site, and they had to set up a whole bunch of mirrors because everybody was hitting it all the time, and we all had terrible connections. So like each of these pictures would take 10 minutes to download, and if they timed out, you'd have to download it again. It was a weird time.
Yeah.
It was also the year that they launched the Cassini probe to Saturn, which was the kind of sister mission to Galileo, which was the one that went to Jupiter.
Right.
But it launched from Cape Canaveral and did a couple of gravity assists around Venus, and then back to Earth, and then Jupiter on the way out to Saturn. But the thing that I remember most about that was we were supposed to go down for the launch to watch the launch, and then they kind of had to shut down guest access or whatever to the launch because of people protesting the RTGs on the probe. It was a nuclear powered probe. It had, I think, 35 pounds or kilograms, I think.
It was like 70 something pounds of plutonium.
Yeah, 33 kilograms of nuclear fuel, which would be like 70 something pounds. And people were upset, but Saturn was far enough away that solar panels of the time wouldn't work.
Right.
Or wouldn't provide enough power for the length of time. And as a result, they used a little radioactive isotope decay. It didn't, I feel like there were, I believe my understanding was that the two complaints about the anti-nuclear activists at the time were that if it exploded at launch, it would irradiate a large portion of Central Florida, which, whatever.
Oof, wow. Judgy.
Or also on the Earth assist loop, if something happened and it crashed back into the planet, it could irradiate the entire planet. And then NASA did the math on like what that would mean, which I'm sure was their version of the math was rosy, but they were like, at most it would cause like 5,000 early deaths or something like that due to cancer, which it was like kind of on one hand, nuclear radiate the entire planet, kill 5,000 people. That's not too bad. On the other hand, killing 5,000 people always is bad. It's always to be avoided. Yes. So
yes,
luckily the Cassini did not crash on the gravity assist. Those are pretty well established processes, and we got a lot of really good pictures and science out of that. And we sent a probe to Titan, I think. We dropped something. I can't remember which of Saturn's moons, the Huygens probe. I don't know how you say that actually.
Huygens, I believe.
Huygens. Realizing that this is a word I've only ever seen spelled and never heard said.
I believe that's right.
It landed on Titan. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little itsy bitsy thing.
Hang on, this can't have been the first nuclear powered probe. I thought Voyager.
No. We sent a bunch of nuclear powered probes.
Yeah, like why now? Was it the quantity of fuel? Or?
It was because it was a lot of fuel, and people also. I don't believe that either of the Voyagers did Earth Earth gravity slingshots.
Okay. Yeah. So just increased kind of
it was
risk surface
risk.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. Also, it was convenient. Like it was like, who knows what people decide to protest, right?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Fair. Got a little games section here. As you mentioned, DirectX 5 came out in 97, which was like, in my mind, that was the first like kind of complete DirectX, right?
It's the first one that felt real.
Yeah.
It's the first one that like was a cohesive thing that worked better than the manufacturer specific APIs pretty universally.
Right. Like that was the point I remember thinking like, oh, I guess this DirectX thing is actually the thing. Like that's going to be what underpins all of this going forward and not just like a failed experiment.
Yeah. I mean, DirectX 3 introduced Direct 3D, but Direct 3D at that time was a little janky and you were usually better off running the manufacturer specific versions if there happened to be one. DirectX 5 is when we stopped seeing the manufacturer specific versions and we started seeing games like Jedi Knight, Dark Forces 2 ship as fully 3D, Direct 3D accelerated games.
Yeah. When you mentioned earlier that there were not a lot of Direct 3D games at the time, Jedi Knight is not the first, but it's one of the first major ones that I remember.
It was the first of the ones that were actually also good games, I would say.
Like a lot of the Direct 3D games you were getting at that time were like packed in with your 3D accelerator.
Hyper Blade.
Right. Like Revolt.
Revolt was okay. It was a bedroom racing game.
It's a good game, actually. No, it's like a totally good game. Yeah, I don't mean to malign it in any way, but it was not super high profile.
A lot of MechWarrior 2 ports.
I mean, this was as we've mentioned, this was right in the middle of like John Carmack's soapboxing about how terrible Direct 3D was all the time. So still a lot of the big game development was happening with OpenGL.
Yeah, or OpenGL specifically tuned to work with Glide.
Oh yeah, Glide, like the Glide wrapper.
GL, yeah, the wrapper.
Good old Glide wrapper.
But it was kind of it was weird because it was also, I mean, the N64 came out in 96 technically, but I don't think I knew anybody who had one until 97.
You reminded me of this because you mentioned that for this, and I was like, what are you talking about? It came out in 96. I got one on launch day. Like that, no, but then now you're making me think I've forgotten that, like, were they actually really hard to get for a while? I think you might be right.
I remember the first time I heard about them being available in stores where you could get one if you hadn't like pre-ordered or put money down or something was that Walmart and Target started having them just after Christmas.
I think you're actually right.
Because I got mine in January and I ended up driving to 4 different stores to find copies of. Did it come with Mario 64 or did you have to pay for Mario 64?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. It was not packed in, but something happened where they like, I'd have to go pull this up. I want to say they like lowered the price of the console right before launch. If I'm not mistaken, something strange happened with the pricing right around launch.
I feel like when I bought the console, I got the only game that they had that I was interested in was Wave Race. And then I had to drive another 40 miles to get Super Mario 64.
Like, look, I mean, wait. Oh, you said the only game they had that you were interested in
at the store. Like there were not a large selection of games available at launch for the N64.
I was going to say Wave Race is a fine game, but maybe not the only game to get for it. I I don't know if I can find something as obscure as a price drop right before launch of the Nintendo 64, but I am positive that happened.
It may be that they unpacked the game and did the price drop.
Oh gosh, no, I found it right here on Wikipedia. Yeah.
Oh.
Originally intended to be priced at $250, the console was ultimately launched at $199.99.
And did it come with Mario 64?
No, it did not.
Yeah.
To compete, so yeah, you still had to, but to compete with the sad phrasing here is to compete with the Sony and Sega offerings. I don't think that the Saturn was in a very competitive position at that point. But anyway,
rough year for Saturn.
But I do remember, like, I needed a Nintendo 64 more than anything on the planet. Like I did so many odd jobs that summer to make enough money to buy one.
It had SGI and then hardware in there.
I mean, that was like some of the earliest internet videos I ever downloaded were like Mario 64 import clips from IGN, like little postage stamp QuickTime videos. But anyway, I remember like just saving relentlessly. And then like at the last second, they dropped the price and I was like, oh man, now I can definitely afford it.
Now you can get Wave Race.
How often does that happen?
The cartridges were expensive too.
Yes.
The cartridges were like $70 as I recall.
Well, it varied by size, of course.
Yeah,
yeah, you're right. I found an article from, I don't know who originally wrote this, from 1997 about stock shortages. Yes. That the Nintendo 64 was very difficult to get for a while.
Yeah, I think I was able to get a second controller and Wave Race when I found mine. And then the next day I managed to get a copy of Mario 64.
Other notable releases in 97, Final Fantasy 7.
Oh yeah. The best Final Fantasy.
Diablo.
Yeah, I never played. I bought Diablo and returned Diablo because I didn't understand what you're supposed to do.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
interesting.
It's embarrassing.
I mean, the history of Diablo, I think, is pretty well documented these days. But like, it started as a turn-based game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it started as an XCOM-ish sort of thing, and they only made it real time, like late in development, when they realized, like, oh, this is fun. So yes, it was like kind of a new type of game at that time.
The thing that was interesting too about it was dynamic. Right, the dungeons were dynamically generated off of tiles, which was novel.
Right.
Jedi Knight, which we talked about. Mm-hmm. Quake 2 was probably the release I was most hyped for, and then simultaneously disappointed by.
I can agree with that. Sure. Yes, I was also desperate to get my hands on Quake 2, and yes, the multiplayer was
10 hertz continues to suck.
A bit of a step down, some would say.
Yeah,
it had its look. The railgun is a pretty good idea. Like there were plenty of good ideas in Quake 2.
Yeah, it just didn't. Railgun was fully realized in Quake 3.
Yes, yes, Quake 3. Well, some might say Quake 3 is the game that fixed Quake 2's problems. Anyway, GoldenEye, first probably really major console shooter, if not first one ever.
GoldenEye was the first game I played with 2 stick controls.
Oh yeah, right. That madness.
Because you could grab both center prongs, 2 center prongs, and you could 2 stick it.
Yeah.
Which basically made you unstoppable compared to people who were only using one stick and a D-pad.
Oh, sure. And of course, the big what if for me on this list is Ultima Online. The what if being what if Ultima Online had been the thing.
Did you not play Ultima Online?
No, I did not at the time. But like, what if it had been the thing that caught on and like all online games were made in its image after?
I mean, they kind of were.
Well, no, but they sanded all the rough edges off, is what I mean. Like that's like Ultima Online, in the sense that Ultima Online was the first big multiplayer anything goes game. I guess that never was going to survive because too many people would have had too bad a time in a game with literally no rules where you can do anything to anybody.
Yeah, my Ultima Online experience was that I was with a friend. We went to EB or Babbage's or wherever you bought games then. I bought a copy of the game. We went to the food court in the mall. We grabbed some food and we were reading the manual for Ultima Online. We went back to my house. We fired up the ISDN. The internet, the guide in the manual had said, hey, if you want to fight, then you should start with blacksmithing and mining because you need the ore in order to make weapons and yada yada. And I went to the starting city where the game sent me. I went to the mine. I mined for about an hour until I was so much shit that I couldn't carry it. I carried it back to town where the forge was. And on the way between the mine and town, you moved out of the no PvP zone and I was ganked in the 5 pixel area And I was like, fuck this. And I took the game back to EB and I was like, I'm never playing this shit again.
Wow. I didn't realize there was a no PvP zone in that. I've never played it. My understanding or my impression was always that there were just literally no safeguards of any kind.
So in the cities, if you attacked someone unprovoked, the city guards would kill you. And the city guards were like high level NPCs. So,
I see. Okay.
So, and they were fast. So it's not like you could tag somebody, kill them, grab their shit and run. You just basically would tag them and then immediately get murked. But the problem was, as I recall, when you died, you dropped everything on the ground and whoever was there just hoovered it up. And then you were just like out your 2 hours of work. And I was like, this is a terrible game.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I could totally understand why I probably also would not have wanted anything to do with it. But that's so amazing.
Well, and then the really unfortunate thing, as I recall, is I wasn't able to return it because it had code and you had to activate an account. So like at that point, I was used to like for example, when I purchased Hell, a cyberpunk thriller featuring Dennis Hopper.
Yes.
I was like, this game is terrible. And I took it back to the store and they gave me my $50 back and I bought another game. You couldn't do that without Ultima Online. It was a big disappointment. Yeah. So I ended up playing a little bit more, but I never got good at the Ultima Online. I
don't understand what Ultima Online is at this point. I'm on UO.com.
It still exists.
And it seems like quite active. There is a post from July 12th.
If only you had a video game website where you play video games and could get into a 20-year-old MMO.
There's seriously a blog post from July 12th bylined by the UO dev team. Like apparently and there's an EA logo still at the bottom of this website. Like is UO just still going?
It's still going. Yeah.
Wow.
The interesting thing is a lot of the early designers on UO were hired straight out of like the Mud and Moo worlds from the early 90s. And then most of them went on to do other things. Like Raph Koster was early on UO and ended up making Star Wars Galaxies and working on EverQuest and a bunch of stuff for Sony Online. And
did Brad McQuaid have it? He's the main EverQuest name that you remember. Did he have anything to do with Ultima Online?
I don't know if he was at Ultima Online. I think he was I think he had a Mud at that point. I can't remember.
But yeah, I mean, like that's super interesting. Let's see. Yeah, you're right. He was working on EverQuest while Ultima Online
this was probably
was in the process of coming out. But yeah, like that's a really interesting through line to me from Mud to UO to EverQuest to WoW, right? Like it took all these steps to get to the one that really blew up and became like the phenomenon. And that was the people make all kinds of derisive jokes about theme park content and Care Bear or whatever about WoW, but like that was the one with all the rough edges kind of smoothed down.
Yeah, I mean, but there is like UO and EverQuest especially. Like UO was a graphical interface on top of like a lot of mud mechanics that then also had other mechanics that made sense in a graphical game layered on top. Same thing for EverQuest. Like EverQuest, there was like positioning and stuff like that in that game because it was a 3D world and you had to rogues had to attack from the back to get their bonuses and stuff like that. But for all intents and purposes, like you could have played a text only version of EverQuest that wasn't substantially different than the graphical version.
Right.
It's a weird time for games.
Yeah. Got a short list of domains that were registered in 1997 that you may have heard of.
Oh, these are my favorite. I love a good domain registration.
Oh yes. Google.com was registered. So yeah.
Formerly.
This was where we became aware that the original name for Google, the search engine, was Backrub.
You think that's because the algorithm benefited, like rewarded links? So like you give me a back rub, I'll give you a back rub.
Interesting. I don't know.
Linking back was the benefit.
Like that was Google's big innovation when it launched, right? Like other search engines weren't really doing like algorithmic sorting of results, right?
Well, no. There was all sorts of algorithmic sorting of results. The big thing was that they valued links based on the number of links coming into your site. So like if you were a site like Slashdot, where you had a bunch of other sites that linked to you, a link out from Slashdot was more valuable than a link out from chudhaven.com or some site that like 8 people linked to.
I guess what I mean is like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like intentional or intelligent sorting of results. Like they had like an actual methodology that was like serving a specific purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody else did too. The thing that everybody else did before though was just weighting the number of links into a site.
Okay.
So like like Lycos or web crawler or whatever would I'm sure there was some sort of proprietary secret sauce, but the main gist was, hey, this site is very popular, therefore we'll put it above the site that is slightly less popular in the rankings.
Right. I've distinctly remember like pre-Google is like, whatever. Like I used Alta Vista for a while, probably used Lycos here. And you know what I mean? Like you weren't that attached to a search engine. Yeah.
There was a search engine that literally popped up 4 frames with 4 different search engine results in it for everything that you searched. Like it was.
Oh, that's right. I forget what that was called.
Metacrawler or something, I think.
Was that Metacrawler? I definitely remember the name Metacrawler. Anyway, yeah, like I distinctly remember like once Google came along and people started talking about it, it was like, oh, well, this is the search engine to use from now on.
So they registered the name and the domain and probably incorporated the company and all that, but we didn't see Google for another 2 to 3 years.
Oh yeah. I was in college, like 99, 2000 before I remember seeing it at all.
Yeah.
It was definitely not at this time.
Netflix, what other famous domains you got, Brad?
Netflix.com, Facebook.com. I think we talked about this earlier. I think there's a pretty good chance the people who run those companies now were not the ones registering those at the time.
Oh, no. Netflix was incorporated in 1997 as a mail order DVD rental service.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's wild because our next topic is the DVDs didn't even launch until 1997. So they were pretty ahead of the game there.
Well, I think they looked at the cost of mailing a disc because disc mailers had a different rate on the USPS. And they were like, hey, here's a business. Facebook, I'm sure was not, Mark Zuckerberg would have been like 2 at that point.
Sure.
But and we all know how Facebook was made in that documentary, The Social Network. Mm-hmm. But Craigslist, I think, was actually Craigslist. Craigslist was in 1999, like popped up in the late 90s.
Yeah. I got to reading about the history of Craigslist a while back, not recently enough to remember a lot of the details, but I was really fascinated by the way he's run that thing.
It is a fascinating company.
It's like, I mean, he makes an extremely healthy living off of it, but he's like, he's resisted like most attempts to monetize it in really deep, shitty ways.
Yeah. He viewed it as it's funny because like on one hand, good intentions and well meant. On the other hand, he literally decimated the entire newspaper business in the Western world.
Yeah.
So good with the bad, I guess.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a public service, right? Like,
yeah,
for the end user, the thing is extremely valuable.
Look, we aren't going to be able, I don't think any of us are in a position to say whether net positive or net negative at this point. The thing I will say is that, it's incredibly useful to have a shared digital marketplace for all sorts of different things. And Craigslist, like everybody else that's been around for 20 plus years, has made some mistakes along the way, but overall has been good for people, I think.
Yeah. As mentioned, the DVD format launched in March 1997, the same day as the Academy Awards.
In the US or everywhere?
Oh, US. So I guess we were like the last region to get DVD, actually. It came out in Japan in November of 96. The rest of Asia got it in, I think, January. Even like New Zealand and Australia, which, how many regions? There were 5 DVD regions.
5 DVD regions, yeah.
I wonder, was Australia and New Zealand a region?
Oceania, I believe, is what that one was.
Yes.
So there was Asia, Europe, North America, South America, Africa.
Oh,
South
interesting.
America and Africa were one, I think, right?
Oh, that was a huge region, actually. So yeah, region 1, US, Canada, and Bermuda, and other US territories. Regions. Oh, I'm sure I knew this at the time. I had forgotten that region 2 included both Japan and Europe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, region 2 was Japan, Europe, South Africa, Egypt, and the Middle East. 3 was Southeast Asia and East Asia, including Hong Kong. Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean for region 4.
Oh, and then Africa was region 5?
5 was Eastern Europe, Baltic states, Russia, Central and South Asia, Indian subcontinent, Africa, North Korea, and Mongolia.
Yeah, suck it, North Korea.
And then this is on an Amazon help page.
Wow.
This is listing China as a region 6. I don't know if that came later. I don't remember there being a region 6 at the time.
We might not have ever seen region 6 stuff. I don't think I saw the first way to get a DVD player that was reasonable for my income bracket and the amount of money I was willing to spend was to buy a creative kit for $200 that had an MPEG-2 decoder card and a DVD-ROM drive that went into the computer.
Yeah.
And then I ran a really long ass analog cable from the bedroom where the computer was into the living room where the computer was, where the TV was.
Well done.
And you could anamorphic squeeze those. That big Panasonic TV I had.
Oh, you can't beat the anamorphic squeeze.
Oh yeah, all those extra pixels. No black pixel. No, don't waste any pixels on black. No bars.
It was much later before I had a TV that could do that. Like probably my last CRT, my Sony Vega that I got.
I had to do it manually. You had to manually squinch the pixels down until it looked like it was the right height.
Yeah,
with the knobs.
You had to do the anamorphic squinch.
Yeah. It was a big deal. I think I bought that creative thing because at the time the DVD publishers were doing like send us your receipt for buying a DVD player and we'll send you 5 or 7 free movies or something. And it was like Twister and Lost in Space and a bunch of not great movies, probably.
It sure was. I remember the Matrix was the first like big DVD release that like was like, oh my God, you have to see this. You have to find somebody with a DVD player and go see this.
Well, when you walked around the Matrix is a whole interesting thing because like it was such a slow burn for a movie. Like I had a professor that I worked for tell me about it, and he's like, "Hey, you should go see this. You'll like this." And I was like, "Okay." I went and saw it. I was like, "Oh man, this is a good movie." By the time I went to Comdex in 2000, which would have been fall of 2000, the DVD had been out for a while, and walking around the floor of a computer trade show was basically like you could watch the entirety of the Matrix in the time it would take you to walk down an aisle in the hallway. Everybody was using the Matrix. It was amazing. But yeah, DVDs were weird.
Yeah. I was looking again at this region list. I think the only reason I'm even really acquainted with DVD regions was from the like utility that would let you change the region code on your DVD-ROM.
Yeah.
But it was like limited, right?
You do 5, as I recall.
I don't know if that was a per manufacturer thing or if that was like a DVD consortium standard.
So DVD
stipulation.
Consortium stipulation, as I recall.
Yeah, that's what I figured. You could only change it like 5 times, right?
Yep, 5 times. The other interesting thing is there was a lot of resistance from even the studios that had signed on to make DVDs. Like there was a lot of there was a competing format called DivX that was a rental only format, basically the discs were disposable that people didn't like for a multitude of reasons. I don't believe that landed in 97. That was a little bit later, but the like early on, a lot of studios didn't do new transfers. So you'd have like a VHS quality transfer onto a DVD. A lot of studios wouldn't do anamorphic discs. So you'd have like 480 lines, your DVD was a 480 line vertical lines of video. And if you had a 16:9 movie, non-anamorphic, it was like a basically VHS quality transfer at that point because of you're getting the same number of lines you got on VHS, which was like 240 or something. And then also a lot of studios didn't do extras. Extras were really important. And there were sites like the Digital Bits and a bunch of DVD review and stuff like that would do reviews of the discs, not of the movies, but of like the quality of the release and like whether the commentaries were any good and who was on the commentaries. And like there was a whole like hierarchy of, okay, a commentary with like a director and a couple of stars or a cinematographer and a director talking about the movie was definitely better than a commentary that was like 5 different people who watched the movie by themselves and that like some editor just cut in the different bits from the different commentary tracks into one long commentary track. Like some people would do like journalist commentaries. So like you'd get a critic that would like that would talk about, Gene Siskel would talk about one of his favorite movies on a commentary track, which feels weird to me. People just didn't know what to do with this at all. It was a really fun time.
I had completely forgotten about that early DVD phase where, like you kind of had to do some research to see if the movie you were buying was actually worth buying or not, because they had just like you said, just like shit, whatever transfer they already had onto a disc with nothing. And it's like, oh, And then that led to the situation later where once DVD blew up, everybody wanted to re-release their movies in like nicer transfers with more features. And then you had to go like, okay, which one am I buying here? Am I getting the crappy early release or is this the nice deluxe later one? Like that was, yeah.
Well, and sometimes they like Jurassic Park famously released like 5 different boxes in the same day. And like there was a Dolby Digital box and there was a DTS box. The DTS box, because the DTS audio took up more data, had fewer special features, but it had the good audio mix because it had the DTS mix. So if you wanted the special features and the good audio, you had to buy 2 different discs. It was a lot.
This was pre multi-disc releases, I assume.
No, these were still multi-disc releases, but like, so they couldn't put 5, like the DTS version had multiple audio commentaries and there wasn't enough room on the main disc for multiple audio commentaries, and the DTS track was the big thing.
I miss the heyday of DVD special features and extras and behind the scenes.
Oh yeah.
It reached its apex. Lord of the Rings, like especially on the extended edition DVDs, like easily the best behind the scenes and special features that have ever been produced for any film ever.
Look, I'm going to make a strong argument for the Criterion edition of Armageddon, where Ben Affleck is so hammered doing the commentary, he just tells you what it was like working with Michael Bay.
Oh yeah,
it's a very good commentary track.
I want to say which Schwarzenegger movie is it where he also got really drunk for the commentary? I think it might be Conan.
There was a lot of them.
Yes,
Racer. He just there's one where he just like narrates what's happening on this. This is when I shoot the guy in the face.
Ridley Scott loves to do that too. Like if you watch like the Ridley Scott commentaries for like Prometheus and Alien Covenant and stuff, like half of it is him literally just describing what's happening on screen.
I'm going to say, like, I learned so much about how people talk about movies and what people think about when they're making movies and, you know, what their intent, like the neat thing about it was a place to get direct kind of from the horse's mouth. Sometimes they were, you know, the little hagiographied stories about what they were trying to do when they were making a movie. And like that doesn't exist in the streaming world as much anymore. Like you don't see a lot of director commentaries and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a bummer. Ryan Johnson famously releases commentaries as podcasts, so you can take them, put them on your phone and listen to them while you're watching the movie in the theater.
That's nice. That's something.
Which I like. Yeah.
My understanding is, they just, nobody feels like they can justify the expense anymore.
Yeah. It's a given the expense of making a 2-hour audio production is like basically the people's time plus a couple hours of editing.
I'm talking more like having a crew on set, like actually shooting as production's happening and stuff like that. Like, well, the big deluxe, like again, if you have never seen the Lord of the Rings stuff, it's like 20,
7 discs.
It's
for
like
each movie, right?
It's like 20 hours per film of stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's insane. And it's all so interesting. And like that cast was clearly having such a good time.
Well, and Peter Jackson cared about what he was doing too, which is the like, I think now the thing that happens often is like productions will invite a YouTube channel to come, but those folks come for like a week at most, probably. And they're not there for the full 40-day shoot or 80-day shoot or Lord of the Rings those shoots were long, but anyway,
it was over a year. Yeah. But anyway, go watch those features if you haven't. I've watched them more times than the movies.
Well, and a lot of that stuff's on YouTube now too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. That's not surprising. Okay. Last thing here. Speaking of movies, that was 97 was when the Star Wars special editions hit theaters.
Oh man, I was so excited for that.
As was I.
The thing that happened though was the year before they re-released the original cuts
in theater. Oh, no, not those didn't hit theaters. I don't.
Yeah,
think.
They absolutely did. I saw Star Wars 2 times during this time period.
To be clear, you're talking about. So actually, weirdly, I just pulled this up. Like the TV commercial that ran back then, the like see them again one last time marketing campaign. That was for the release with the like half face covers, right? Remember that? It was a Stormtrooper, Yoda, and Vader. Each cover was like the cover was split with like half of their face showing against black. Are you sure those ended up in theaters?
Yeah, they released. There were 2. Hold on. Star Wars K1 Star Wars 96 release date. Yeah.
Maybe you're right. I somehow missed that apparently, but like the special editions hitting in 97 were like, to me, that was like, oh my God, I actually can see Star Wars in the theater finally, because I wasn't alive for that the first time.
Yeah, they launched. I can't. This is from the time when the internet is not super useful to you.
Yeah, no, that's fair. The 96 one I remember being a big VHS and Laserdisc push because they were straight up Disney style going to vault it. They were straight up saying, and I just watched that TV commercial. They were like this will be your final chance to own the original Star Wars trilogy. Which at the time I don't think they had come out and said, hey, because we're going to change a bunch of shit and never make the originals available again.
Well, they did eventually in the Blu-ray release, as I recall, but it's a bad transfer.
The DVD one. The DVD release of Star Wars had the Laserdisc transfers, but they were like...
They're bad and non-anamorphic.
Pillar boxed, and it's a mess. Anyway.
Yeah, there was an earlier release. Here we go. 1995. The original trilogy was released on Laserdisc, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Maybe they didn't show it in theaters. Maybe
I don't think they did.
Here we go. No, 1981. Huh.
Yeah, no, that was very much here's your last chance to own these movies.
Man, I could have sworn I saw them in theaters, but maybe not. The special editions, it was divisive. Yeah, people were really upset. I was still upset. That's when I still cared about Star Wars.
I was not super thrilled with most of what happened there.
I mean, the big thing, like the bit with Jabba and the farting noise when he steps over him or whatever, like who cares? The fundamental, the big thing was that changing so that Greedo shot first, like changes a core aspect of that character.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that stuff.
And it's well tread. We don't need to talk about it, but
yeah. I mean, historically, those are interesting to look back at for me as being basically the test bed for the prequels. And the prequels are the beginning of the modern era of digital filmmaking, right? So I think that's fair. The special editions were basically like ILM starting to work out all of the techniques that they were going to need to pull off the prequels, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. The interesting thing, it was funny because by that point we had seen a bunch of DVD releases that were like, Blade Runner famously had like 6 cuts by this point or 4 cuts by this point. It was before the final cut that Ridley Scott eventually released. Yeah. But like there was the studio cut with the narration, and then there was the unicorn cut. There's the TV cut and a bunch of different stuff. This was the first time I remember a director saying, look, this is just the version of the movie now. Like we're not, if you don't like this, too bad. Right.
I mean, that's an extremely George Lucas thing to do.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it was a weird, look, realistically, this is a thing I cared much more about 25 years ago than I do now.
Yeah, sure. Well, especially because like there's all these other ways to get what you want now, right? Like the despecialized editions happened. The Project 4K scans are out there now.
Yeah, I guess if you wait long enough, eventually life finds a way, right?
Yes, somebody's going to figure out how to bring back the thing you miss one way or another. But
well, for me, I remember being upset about the preservationist thing, right? Like because they did destructive scanning on the old negatives.
That's the thing. I think we've talked about this before, but that's the thing I've never understood was that their excuse for why we can never put out the originals again was that they said that they had to cut into the original negative to make the special editions.
I don't understand enough about how that works to understand what is correct and what isn't correct there.
Right.
The thing that I do know from talking to some archivists for different studios is that like preservation wasn't a focus for a lot of films in that time period.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
And as a result, like, a lot of stuff they'll open up something that's supposed to be in a container. It's just not only is it not in good shape, it's just not there anymore.
Right. Like they lose stuff disintegrates or burns or whatever happens. I mean, to expand on what I meant though, like maybe film scanning technology was not there at the time, but like, I mean, I would assume it would have to be, or you couldn't be doing digital effects that like, were they not able to digitally scan the negative before they essentially ruined it in a way that would have preserved it? Like that's the stuff I don't fully understand.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway. It was a weird time, Brad.
Yes. For a lot
mid-90s.
Uh-huh.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
We have reached I'm sure we forgot some stuff, so please let us know.
Yeah.
But we've reached the moment at the end of the show when we thank our patrons.
Thank you, patrons.
Thank you, patrons. This is not the last show of the month. We have one more, I think. So
yes.
That's good.
Just under the gun, the last day of the month.
I know. I'm going to be traveling end of next week, so we should figure out when we're going to record either on this side or the other side, one or the other.
Yes. If you have questions, that'll be a Q&A episode. So hit up the Question Seeking Answers channel on the Discord if you're on the Discord.
Or you can email them to techpod@content.town, where we check the questions every single month.
We do, I swear.
It's just a thing we do reliably and without ever forgetting.
Yes, in real time.
Yeah. But thank you to all of our patrons, everybody who supports us. We really appreciate it. And we hope you have enjoyed the episode. We'll be back next week with another episode. But before we go, we would like to thank all of our patrons, but especially our executive producer tier patrons, including Paddle Creek Games, makers of Fractured Veil, Andrew Slosky, Octothorpe Bunny Crimes, Just Wedge, Jacob Chappell, Joel Krauska, Twinkie is the pick and place, and James Kamek. Thank you also so much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. The phrase Octothorpe Bunny Crimes cinematic universe was uttered on the Discord recently in reference to like us and Nextlander and Shift F1 and just like a lot of the like sort of Whiskey Media adjacent podcasts that have siloed off in different areas.
Bunny crimesing out all around the world.
I really enjoyed that as an umbrella term for this loose family of podcasts.
Yeah. It's always nice when there's a crossover episode. I enjoyed Abby on the Nextlander podcast this week. So. Yeah. But that'll do it for us this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of the show. Thanks everybody for listening. We also have coming up a fabulous episode of the FossPod over at fosspod.content.town, where we talk to the folks who make Blender, which was fascinating.
Yes, excellent conversation.
That'll be out later this week. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you all next week. Bye.